Step out of the car. Now. The officer's voice sliced through the air like a blade, sharp enough to make heads turn inside the Ferrari dealership's glass-walled showroom. A red Ferrari SF9 Estrada idled on the marble display ramp, its engine humming low like a panther waiting to pounce, and in the driver's seat, frozen mid-reach for her iced coffee, sat her. Black, female, tailored navy pantsuit, gold-trimmed heels, hair pulled back with elegant precision. Calm. Compose. But in that moment she wasn't seen as a CEO. Not to the cop charging toward her with one hand already on his holster. Out. Hands where I can see them. He barked again. The crowd inside its sales team, the manager, a few wealthy clients admiring cars gathered near the windows. A woman gasped. Someone started recording on their phone, and from the corner, a salesman muttered under his breath, "Told you. She doesn't look like she belongs in that car." The Ferrari's scent still lingered, new leather, cold metal, the faint musk of adrenaline. But what hit harder was the silence, the kind that comes when judgment walks in wearing a badge. She didn't move, not yet, just slowly turned her head and locked eyes with the officer through the open driver's window. No fear, just fatigue. The kind that comes from being questioned too many times in places you've already earned your right to be. Behind her, the showroom manager walked outside, hands raised, trying to de-escale it. She was just test driving, he began. She refused to show ID. The officer cut him off. And this vehicle is listed under a different name. That made her smell a barely. What would you have done? Step out and explain yourself like they expect. Or sit still and wait for them to realize what mistake they just made. Have you ever walked into a place and felt the whole room trying to decide if you were worthy of being there? The tension in the air now was thick enough to taste. Not just about a car. It was about assumption, status, skin. And she knew every move from this point on would be watched, judged, replayed. But instead of moving, she did something that stunned even the officer. She looked him square in the eye and whispered, "You might want to check the ownership." That was the moment everything shifted, because what she said next, that wasn't even the worst part. Let me take you back to how she even ended up behind the wheel of that Ferrari, and why the man who reported her, he had a personal reason to fear who she really was. But before we go there, have you ever been wrongly accused just for how you looked? Or overheard someone assuming you're something you're not? Comment with just one word, almost, if it hit a little too close. The showroom smelled like new money. Polished marble floors gleamed beneath rows of overhead spotlights. Crimson Ferraris lined the room like royalty on parades, lethal, untouchable. The air was rich with leather, steel, and something colder, the low murmur of judgment. She had walked in just 10 minutes earlier, heels clicking confidently across the floor. Heads turned in it because she was loud, but because she was unexpected. A black woman, alone, dressed well, yes, but not in a flashy way. Just clean lines, timeless style, understated, controlled, and that made people uncomfortable. The receptionist's eyes scanned her from head to toe, hesitating just long enough for the message to land. "Do you even belong here? Can I help you?" she asked, with the kind of tight-lipped smile people wear when they're trying not to say what they're thinking. "I'm here to test drive the SF90, she answered calmly. A pause, then a flick of the eyes toward the white man standing beside the espresso bar, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the scene with smug amusement. That man, his name was Leonard Chastain, old money, partner in 3 luxury car dealerships, and someone who didn't forget slights real or imagined. He stepped in before the receptionist could respond. "Ma'am, that model is reserved for serious clients. Perhaps you'd like to browse or use inventory instead." The tone was polite, the insult wasn't. She didn't flinch, just raised one eyebrow. "Your team confirmed the appointment this morning." Leonard glanced at her again, then made a choice. He leaned toward the receptionist and whispered, "Call security, and maybe the cops. That car's not going anywhere." She heard him. Of course she did. But instead of reacting, She nodded at the keys the receptionist was now holding with obvious hesitation. "Do I need to ask twice?" Reluctantly, the keys slid across the counter. Moments later, she was behind the wheel, engine growling, fingers on leather, heart steady. She didn't need validation. She needed the world to stop assuming. But you know that feeling, right? When someone smiles at you like you're dangerous or invisible. Have you ever been in a place where you could afford everything but people look at you? Like you snuck in through the back. It burns. And she felt it, but she swallowed it, for now. Leonard stepped outside, pulled out his phone, and said 3 words to the police dispatcher. "She's stealing it." That's when everything unraveled. That's how the officer arrived so fast, so loud, so ready to play hero. And that man, Leonard, he had history with her. Because years ago, she turned down his offer, said no to being his silent investor. And now, he thought this was his moment to remind her who really controlled access. But what he didn't know, had none of them knew, was that this wasn't just a test drive. This was the final inspection of a dealership she was about to buy out. Would you hold your anger if someone accused you of theft in public, just because you didn't look the part? Or would you make them regret it right there, on the showroom floor? Comment 1 if you'd hold back, 0 if you'd let it all out. Because next, the showroom manager is about to realize the name on the paperwork, and it's going to change everything. People inside had stopped pretending not to watch. The Ferrari's engine had gone quiet, but the tension, it was louder than ever. From behind the showroom's frosted glass walls, faces pressed forward, some curious, some amused, some recording. You could feel it in the air. The electric buzz of people smelling drama and deciding who the villain must be. One man sipped his espresso slower than before. A woman near the desk lowered her sunglass not to help her see, but to hide the smirk forming on her lips. Inside the car, her hand remained still on the steering wheel, every breath measured, every heartbeat louder than it should have been. And still no one approached her like a client. Even now, with the car parked, engine off, keys in hand, they didn't see her as someone who belonged. The officer stayed planted outside her window, one hand on his belt, the other hovering too close to the weapon at his hip. "Ma'am," he said again, slower this time. "This will go easier if you just exit the vehicle." She turned her head, slowly. "Do you see the name on the test drive confirmation email?" The officer blinked, then glanced at the receptionist, who now looked visibly nervous. "Didn't check," she stammered. "I thought." "You thought what?" the CEO asked softly. That silence again, the kind that doesn't protect, it condemns. Somewhere near the back, a younger employee, maybe an intern, shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth, then closed it, too afraid to say what he knew, that she was the 10:45 appointment, that he'd seen the internal memo, that he'd overheard the name whispered in the manager's office earlier that week. But fear kept him silent. That's how systems win, right? Not with loud hate, but with quiet compliance. And yet, she didn't yell, didn't protest, didn't make a scene. Because sometimes power isn't in the volume, it's in the patience. Still, the shame crept in, the kind that feels like heat crawling up your neck, the kind that makes you want to disappear, even when you've done nothing wrong. Have you ever felt that? Not guilt, not fear, just that sharp, hollow sting of being publicly misjudged. If you have, you know exactly why she sat still. Not out of submission, but out of calculation. Because inside, a clock was ticking, and someone else's summon far more powerful than Leonard was supposed to arrive any minute now. She glanced at her watch, 10:52, right on time. And that's when she saw him, the showroom manager, finally stepping out of his office, straightening his tie, walking briskly toward the chaos outside. What he would say next would make someone in that crowd drop their phone. But before we get to that, would you have stayed in the car? Would you have waited for proof to speak louder than anger? Or would you have walked away and let them keep believing the lie? Drop a 1 if you'd have stayed, 0 if you'd have left. Because up next, the man who runs this place is about to see a name on a document. That will ruin his entire morning. And his reaction? It'll be worth every second she waited. Before I tell you what the manager saw when he checked his phone, I know you might be busy. Maybe you're watching this while working, or your break's almost over, or your brain's full after all this tension. But if stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this unfolds, because what happens next turns the entire showroom upside down. The manager stepped outside like a man stepping into fog, confused, slightly annoyed, and still fixing the collar of his shirt. "Officer, is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice clipped, professional. The cop straightened slightly. "This woman is refusing to exit the vehicle. She claims she had a test drive scheduled, but her name isn't on the registry, and one of your associates flagged this as suspicious." The manager turned to the receptionist, who now looked like she wanted to vanish into the floor. She didn't speak, just gave a helpless shrug. Then, finally, he looked at her, still seated in the Ferrari, calm, collected, not a bead of sweat on her forehead. Their eyes locked. She didn't raise her voice, didn't plead. She simply said, "Check your email." 3 words, but it landed like a slap. The manager blinked. "Excuse me, you got a message this morning, 9:12 a.m. subject line, client acquisition due diligence, from Marcellus Holdings." The showroom stilled. The name hung in the air like a strange perfume, faintly familiar, oddly powerful. And that's when a ripple moved through the staff. Someone near the back whispered, "Wait, that's the investment group that bought into La Ferrari Group last quarter." Another voice, "Did she say Marcellus?" The intern, the one who had stayed quiet earlier, now looked visibly shaken. He opened his tablet, browsed quickly, and froze. Outside, the manager still hadn't moved. He reached into his blazer pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened his inbox. And as he scrolled, his face changed. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, just slower. His jaw slackened, his eyes narrowed, his hands stopped moving. Because there it was, the name, the appointment, the photo, the document showing temporary ownership transfer for the test vehicle. The woman in front of him wasn't a client. She was a board member, a partial owner of the very group that had acquired 18% of their regional Ferrari franchise. And suddenly he realized, he wasn't in charge here. Would you enjoy watching someone realize they just disrespected their superior? Or would part of you still feel the sting of how long it took them to see the truth? Drop a comment with just one word email if you've ever been overlooked, only to have someone come crawling back when they found out who you really were. Because next the officer is going to ask a question. And her answer, it'll shut down every voice in that showroom instantly. The manager's phone trembled slightly in his hand. He didn't say a word, just looked up from the screen and took a step back. But the officer, he wasn't ready to let go. "Still need to verify," he muttered. "Could be a forgery, could be identity theft. Happens all the time." The words weren't shouted, they were softer now, but still sharp. And she heard them. Her smile faded, just a bit. Because even after all this, after the confirmation, after the email, after the name, he still couldn't accept the possibility that she was exactly who she said she was. So she tilted her head, leaned slightly toward the window, and asked, "Is this the part where you pretend you're protecting someone or just trying not to feel small?" The officer stiffened. Someone in the crowd coughed. Another adjusted their phone angle. The young intern, he looked like he wanted to melt into the tile. And the manager, he still hadn't said a word. He knew he was no longer the one in control. "I'll need to confirm the vehicle's registration through dispatch," the officer said. "Radio already in hand. Just a formality." She nodded, slowly. "By all means." Then, deliberately, she reached into the car's center console and pulled out a slim black folder. No sudden moves, nothing aggressive. But the gesture made every muscle in the officer's body tighten. She opened the folder with the calm precision of someone used to signing million-dollar contracts. Before breakfast, inside the official dealership paperwork, temporary ownership certification. Her name printed in bold at the top. She didn't offer it. She just laid it on the dashboard, silent, unmoving, and let the facts do what her presence never could. The officer spoke into his radio, giving plate numbers, VIN, and dealership code. The air felt brittle, like one wrong word might shatter it all. And then waiting, 60 seconds, 90. The crowd, once buzzing, had gone almost completely quiet. The man with the espresso, he'd stopped sipping. The receptionist, she was no longer at her desk. One of the clients muttered, "I think we screwed up." Have you ever watched someone doubt your every word until a third party confirms what you've known all along? And even then they still don't look you in the eye. The radio crackled. A voice came through. Confirmed. Vehicle registered to Marcella's Holdings. Subleased to a Letitia Monroe. The officer looked at her. She looked back. Letitia. That was her. And now everyone knew it. But before he could say a word, she reached down, turned the key, and shut off the engine. Slowly deliberate, then finally spoke. "Are we done here?" But no one answered, because at that exact moment a new voice cut in from the side. Not the officer, not the manager, but someone watching, someone filming. And what he said, that would flip the story again. Have you ever had a moment where you thought the worst was over only to realize it had just begun? Comment one word, almost. Because next we find out what the live streamer caught on camera and why it made everything even worse. Yo, I got it. I caught the whole thing. The voice came from a tall teenager near the espresso bar, phone raised, eyes wide, heart clearly pounding. He wasn't a journalist, not even a customer, just someone waiting with a friend, killing time. But he had been filming since the moment Leonard whispered to the receptionist. And now he hit play. The crowd parted like water. On screen, Leonard, standing by the front desk, speaking clearly into frame. "Call security, and maybe the cops. That car's not going anywhere." Then the camera tilted slightly, catching a shot of the receptionist's screen blinking with an appointment notification. Letitia Monroe, 10:45 a.m. SF90 test drive confirmed by manager. The room went quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of silence. Not curiosity, not tension, shame. The receptionist turned pale. The manager exhaled like he'd been punched in the stomach. Leonard, nowhere to be seen. He'd quietly stepped into his office 3 minutes earlier and shut the door. The officer shifted uneasily for the first time. His stance relaxed not because he suddenly approved, but because he'd realized something deeper. He'd been used by a man with influence, used to intimidate, used to humiliate, used to play a private revenge game, all under the mask of procedure. Letitia still hadn't moved from the driver's seat, still poised, still powerful. But now, every eye was on her, and instead of gloating she leaned back, looked around the room, and asked one simple question. How many of you would have said something if there hadn't been a camera? No one answered. Because the truth, most wouldn't have. Some hadn't, and a few had enjoyed every second until it turned. Have you ever looked back and realized you were part of the silence? That your inaction helped someone else get hurt? That moment, it changes people. Even the intern lowered his head. Even the man with the espresso quietly placed his cup on the table and walked out. Letitia reached for the door handle and stepped out of the Ferrari with elegance, not anger. Not a single sound from her heels touching the marble floor. But her presence, thunderous. And that's when she said it. Not loud, not for revenge, but with clarity. Please have Mr. Chastain come out. He'll want to speak to the majority shareholder before I decide whether this location keeps its license. The words landed like bricks. Majority, shareholder, license. The officer blinked. The receptionist nearly dropped her tablet. And the manager took a step back. Would you be able to say something that bold after everything? Would you even want to, or would you just walked away? Drop a comment, stay if you do what she did. Because next Leonard has to walk out of that office. And he'll have to face the woman he tried to erase. Leonard stepped out like a man forced onto a stage he no longer controlled. His blazer was crisp, his tee flawless, but the confidence in his stride gone. He scanned the room, noticing the silence, the lowered gazes, the phones, and then her. Letitia stood in front of the Ferrari, the very car he tried to weaponize against her. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stood there, calm as ever, waiting. "Letitia," he began, smoothing his tone like it might polish away the damage. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I had no idea you were." She raised a hand, just one. He stopped mid-sentence. "No need to insult us both, Leonard," she said. "You knew exactly who I was." A beat passed. No one moved. Letitia reached into her handbag and pulled out a thin leather folio, unsnapped it, slid out a single page. It wasn't Dramatigis Surgical. "This is the partnership contract from 3 months ago," she said. "Marcellus Holdings acquired 18.2% of the regional franchise. Page 3 clause for C. Voting authority on client-side operations." Leonard's face twitched. She handed the paper to the showroom manager, who took it with trembling hands. "And this," she continued, "is the original email from your personal address, dated April 19th. You called me to Visible to be brought into the boardroom and suggested a silent investment instead." She didn't raise her voice, but every syllable hit like a hammer. Even the officer took a subtle step back. Even the Livestry Merstal Riekerding whispered, "Bro." Leonard opened his mouth again. "I was protecting your image." A few gasps. Letitia looked at him not with fury, but with something sharper. Clarity. "Leonard, you weren't protecting me," she said. "You were protecting your illusion of control. And today you lost it." The crowd shifted. A woman who had giggled earlier now looked away. The intern stood taller. And the showroom? It wasn't just quiet. It was listening. Because in that moment, everyone knew Letitia wasn't just another client. She was the room's true center of gravity. Have you ever seen someone realize they're not the most powerful person in the room anymore? It's not loud. It's not violent. It's just inevitable. But Leonard wasn't done. Not yet. He pulled out his phone, scrolling furiously, then lifted his head. "I'm calling the board," he said. "Let's see if they agree with you." Letitia didn't move. She just smiled, ever so slightly. "Go ahead," she said. "Call them." And that's when everything tilted again. Because the man he was about to call, he'd already spoken to Letitia this morning. And what he told her was far more shocking than Leonard could ever imagine. Have you ever been one step ahead of someone trying to ruin you? Then you'll want to hear what the chairman told her just hours before this all began. Leonard's fingers trembled as he dialed. The screen glowed against his palm. The name, Board Chair W.R. Kavanaugh. He pressed call. The ring buzzed once, twice. Then connected. A warm, confident voice came through the speaker. "Leonard, I was just about to call you." Letitia crossed her arms. Leonard straightened his spine, fighting to keep control. "There's been a situation. A client claiming to represent Marcellus Holdings." "She doesn't claim, Leonard," the voice interrupted. "She does represent them, fully. Strategically, as of this morning, she's been appointed as our interim regional lead, with authority over every location in your zone." Leonard's face froze. The entire room could hear. He hadn't switched to private mode. He'd left it on speaker too flustered to think straight. Gasps. One of the salesmen blinked twice. Another lowered his phone, no longer Riekerding, just stunned. "To wasn't informed," Leonard stammered. "No," the chairman replied, calm but sharp. "Because she asked us not to announce it until after her first site visit. Said she wanted to see how people treated her without the title." A pause. Then, "Looks like she got her answer." Letitia didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just looked at Leonard, steady, quiet. And in that silence, he deflated. Because there was nothing left to say. What does it feel like when a man who always thought he had power suddenly realizes it was never his? The manager looked down. The receptionist wiped at something on her cheek, maybe sweat, maybe shame. Even the officer took off his sunglasses. No more pretense. The chairman's voice came again. "Letitia, you have full discretion. I trust your judgment. Whatever action you deem necessary, we'll back it." She nodded once. "Thank you," she said simply. The call ended, and in its place, a silence so heavy it could bend glass. Someone clapped one soft, hesitant. then another. Soon, the sound of scattered applause echoed through the marble floors. Not for show, but for acknowledgement. Because sometimes respect isn't given, it's reclaimed. Have you ever watched a room flip because truth finally showed up wearing the right name? Then you'll understand what Letitia did next. Because she didn't just walk away. She walked forward, right past Leonard, right to the center of the showroom. And what she said there, that was the kill shot. The one that changed everything. Instantly. Stick around. You'll want to hear the exact words that ended careers before lunchtime. Letitia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked to the center of the showroom, where the Ferrari still gleamed beneath showroom lights, lent witness to everything that had just unfolded. Then she turned, slowly, to face the staff. All employees, she said, her voice crisp, calm, and clear. I'd like you to line up, now. There was no hesitation. The receptionist stood first, then the interns, then the senior salesmen. One by one, they formed a linear at first, then slowly straightening as the room fell into something deeper than silence, obedience. Even Leonard, now visibly sweating, took a step toward the back until Letitia spoke again. Not you. He froze. You're not an employee anymore. A collective inhale swept the room, effective immediately. She continued. You are suspended from all managerial duties at this location. Your conduct will be reviewed by the board. If they need a statement from me, she paused. They'll get it, along with the footage. Leonard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. No one moved to defend him. No one stepped forward to argue. Because deep down, they all knew this wasn't revenge. It was justice, delivered with surgical precision. Letitia turned back to the staff. This showroom will be closed for the next 48 hours. No exceptions. During the time, an internal culture audit will be conducted, dynamis surveys, individual interviews, and one-on-one reviews. A whisper rippled through the team. Not fear, but something closer to hope. Someone finally saw them. The audit will include, she added, not just how clients are treated, but how you were treated by your leadership. She scanned the line. No one met her eyes, but a few nodded. I'm not here to play optics. I'm here to restructure power. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, you're free to leave. But if you stay, you'll be working in a space where dignity isn't optional. One of the interns blinked fast, like holding back tears. The officer, still near the door, gave her a nod, not as an apology, but as respect. Leonard, he stepped back and sat down, defeated, deconstructed. Have you ever seen someone lose everything and realize they had nothing to say in return? Then you know what it felt like to stand in that room. But Letitia, she wasn't done. Because one branch was never the real issue. And next she was heading to corporate. The rot was deeper. And she intended to pull it out root and all. Stick around. Because what she uncovers at headquarters, it will make this showroom look like a warm-up. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Floor 42. Letitia stepped out into the marble-clad lobby of Ferrari North America's regional headquarters. Sleek, modern, cold, everything designed to impress. But she wasn't here to be impressed. She was here to take inventory off people. As she walked through the hall, polished shoes echoing under designer lighting, heads turned. Some knew who she was now. Most pretended not to. A few, mostly men in tailored suits, offered smiles that were too tight, too rehearsed. One of them, a VP of Operations, approached with a clipboard. Ms. Monroe, he said, voice syrupy, so sorry about the situation. I've arranged a meeting room and a full itinerary. She didn't take the clipboard. I'm not here for optics, she said. I want access to all internal HR reports filed in the last 18 months, all branches. Unredacted. His smile faltered. I'd need clearance for that. You already have it, she replied, tapping the badge clip to her jacket. He looked down, saw the emblem, went pale. She moved past him without another word. Down the hall, past the showroom-style executive offices, into a secured archive room. The woman at the desk blinked twice before silently unlocking the cabinet. Letitia worked fast, pulling files, scanning reports, laying out complaint after complaint. Racial slurs brushed off as misunderstandings. Promotions quietly denied. Clients selectively routed. Patterns emerged. Names repeated, and yet very few resolutions. She opened one drawer marked non-escalated. Inside, a thick folder, unlabeled. She flipped it open. At least 20 pages sentinel complaints about Leonard. Ignored, minimized, stamped, no further action required. Letitia exhaled sharp, controlled, but inside, a fire. She turned as someone knocked softly at the door. It was a young woman probably no older than 25, nervous, but determined. She handed Letitia a manila envelope. "I wasn't supposed to show you this," she whispered, "but I've seen what they've done to people who speak up, and I saw what you did at the showroom." Letitia took the envelope, opened it. Inside, screenshots of deleted complaints. One was from a woman who had been fired 3 weeks after reporting Leonard for verbal abuse. Another, a security camera still showing Leonard grabbing an employee's wrist during an argument. All buried, all silenced. Until now. Letitia met the young woman's eyes. "What's your name?" "Sam," she replied, almost too quietly to hear. "Well, Sam," Letitia said, folding the envelope, "you just helped me clean house." Because this wasn't about one manager. This was about the foundation, the structure, the rot. Have you ever suspected the problem wasn't just one person but the culture that protected them? Then you know why Letitia didn't stop at one showroom. Because next, she's walking into a room full of shareholders. And she's not asking for permission anymore. The boardroom smelled of leather and legacy. A long obsidian table stretched beneath a chandelier of frosted glass gold, expensive, impersonal. Seated around it, 12 stakeholders, each with decades of market experience and carefully guarded expressions. Letitia stepped in alone. No assistant, no slideshow, just a single folder in her hand. One board member, a silver-haired man in a pinstripe suit, barely looked up. Another, a woman with a diamond pin and narrowed eyes, leaned back as if waiting for Letitia to perform. She didn't. She walked straight to the head of the table, placed the folder down, and spoke. "These are your problems." No preamble, no pleasantries, just facts. She opened the folder and slid documents across the table, copies of buried HR reports, screenshots of internal communications, video stills of Leonard's behavior, and a breakdown of how many complaints had been misfiled or ignored at 3 major locations. Gasps no, but eyebrows rose, postures shifted, paper rustled faster than usual. One shareholder, Barrett, 67, with a reputation for old-school values, snorted. "So, what now?" he said. "We fire one bad apple and let the press spin this into a redemption tour." Letitia didn't flinch. She looked him directly in the eye. "No," she said. "You overhaul the orchard." Another pause. "I'm not here to tell you about bad behavior. I'm here to offer structural correction. Because this isn't a PR risk, it's a revenue risk." Now she had their attention. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a second sheet, this one with bullet points. A new protocol for branch-level audits. Mandatory bias training, at the check-the-box kind. But peer-reviewed and enforced. Leadership rotation every 18 months. A whistleblower line that bypasses local HR and reports directly to the board. "And who enforces all this?" Barrett asked, still scoffing. "I do," Letitia replied, "with oversight from Marcellus Holdings and full shareholder transparency." Several board members exchanged glances. She didn't stop. In the next quarters, 3 regional showrooms are due for review. Based on current patterns, I estimate it will require immediate restructuring. If you approve this plan, we move fast. If not, well. She placed her phone on the table, screen facing up. The live stream footage from the showroom still open. You might want to read the comments section. Even the diamond pin woman leaned forward now, because they knew this wasn't about damage control anymore. It was about survival. Have you ever seen a room full of power struggle to keep up with someone who didn't beg for approval but walked in already owning the outcome? then you understand why. When Letitia sat down at that table, she didn't ask for a vote. She dared them to oppose her, and now they have to choose. Next, the board votes, and one final voice Simeon no one expected will break the tie. The boardroom held its breath. 12 votes, 6 in favor, 6 opposed. No one moved, even the walls seemed to wait. Letitia sat still at the head of the table, not sweating, not speaking, just waiting. Then the door opened. Soft heels clicked across the marble floor. Every head turned. Into the room walked a woman in her 60s, silver curls, sharp eyes. A quiet smile with no trace of apology. Marla Jameson, founder of Phoenix Equity, one of the fastest-growing venture firms supporting women of color in executive leadership. Al sound disclosed until this moment the latest minority stakeholder in Marcellus Holdings. Letitia stood to greet her. "You're late," she said. Marla smiled. "I'm always on time, just not on their time." She walked to the final seat at the boardroom table, the one left empty until now. Barrett scoffed. "This isn't procedure, hasn't been. She's been vetted," said the chairman, cutting him off for the first time. "And her vote counts." Silence again. Marla didn't speak for long. She looked at Letitia, then at the pile of documents. Then she slid her vote onto the table. "In favor," she said. And just like that, 7-6. Majority. The motion passed. But Letitia didn't smile. She didn't pump her fist or gloat. She just nodded once and stood. "This isn't about control," she said, voice steady. "It's about culture. You can't patch the roof while the foundation's still rotting. And if any of you are still waiting for me to fail quietly, I suggest you pack early." She gathered her folder, walked toward the door, then paused, turned back, and added, "Respect isn't earned by holding a title. It's proven by what you tolerate." And with that, she was gone. No applause, no fanfare, just the soft echo of someone who didn't break through the glass ceiling. She replaced it with concrete. Have you ever had to stay silent when everything inside you screamed to speak? Have you ever dreamed of walking into a room where every no you ever received finally turned into a door you could open? Then you know what Letitia carried in that folder, and why she never needed permission to lead. If her story moved you even a little, comment below. Because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in wearing heels and leaves with the whole building